Today I'm making a recipe that I feel is kind of a sleeper hit in the book. It is my all-Allium quiche. And I was actually inspired to make it because I recently ate quiche for the first time in a long time and was reminded how incredible of a food it is. So I'm gonna show you how to make it.
What's a quiche?
Okay, quiche. A quiche is a form of savory tart with a pastry crust, and then the filling is like a very creamy, gently set egg mixture, and often there's like things mixed in. So one of the classic quiches is quiche Lorraine, which is cheese and ham. And today I'm making what I'm calling my all-Allium quiche because it's just quiche with like a ton of different oniony things mixed in with it, plus a little pancetta. It's really, really good. I have a 9-inch springform pan. You could do it in a 10-inch. It just would be a slightly less tall. So springform pan, I have a bunch of dried beans. This is what I use for pie weights. We bake it weighted down. We take the weights out and bake it without any filling to really set and dry out the crust because I don't want to have like pasty, floury, soft dough at the bottom of my quiche. I'm using a hand blender, which I find to be like the most convenient tool. When it comes to pastry, you could use a regular blender. You could also just do it by hand. For the filling, I have 4 large eggs, 2 cups half and half, 4 ounces pancetta. This is optional, you could leave that out. Black pepper, kosher salt, some oil. You could use vegetable. I just have olive oil around. 2 tablespoons butter, 2 teaspoons white wine vinegar, then all of my alliums, specifically leek, scallion, garlic, shallot, yellow onion. And then, of course, the crust. I have 1 recipe of my Flaky All-Butter Pie Dough, some all-purpose flour for rolling it out. So check out how I make my Flaky All-Butter Pie Dough. This I put together last night. And I'm gonna put it into a springform pan. I'm gonna roll this out. You wanna roll it out cold, but you can let it sit at room temp for a minute or 2 just so it can soften slightly. And I want to get this into somewhat of a round. It does not have to be perfectly round at all. We're not going for like a really clean finished like fluted edge or anything.
What if somebody used your rough puff recipe?
I don't think rough puff is ideal because it's gonna puff up too much. I just think that opens the door for like cracking and some holes in your dough where the filling can seep through. So the filling for quiche is quite liquid. It's eggs and dairy. So you want something with a slightly finer consistency and texture. So I wouldn't use puff, but pie dough is fine. All right, so I'm gonna get this out to about like a 13-inch round or so. I'm using a lot of flour because this is getting pretty soft. So I have a little trick for very evenly setting this crust into your springform pan. So I'm gonna slide my base underneath my dough and try to center it as best you can. You're gonna fold in all of the edges like so, just to get it so that everything's sitting inside the middle base. Then you're gonna pop the ring onto it, close it, and now all you have to do is unfold and press those pieces up against the sides. It's almost like making a galette, but with straight sides. So I'm pressing the dough around the sides. It's not perfectly even. You just wanna try to make sure you don't have one area where it's like much shorter than the others because that's gonna affect how much filling you can get into your crust. So I have a rack in the center of the oven and I'm preheating to 425. But before I can parbake this, I want to chill it down. So I'm gonna pop it in the freezer. I just want the dough to get firm and to relax a bit. So like 10 or 15 minutes. I'm gonna do this optional step in the recipe, which is making these decorative kind of petals out of onion. So I have 1 yellow onion here that I peeled, I'm gonna cut it in half through the stem end. That's important. I just wanna oil the surface of the onion a little bit because it has a tendency to stick. The recipe calls for neutral oil, but I just have olive here, and it's such a small amount, so that's fine. Okay, I'm just gonna let this sit here. Don't touch them. It's gonna sit undisturbed. So here's my crust. It's very firm, it's very cold. And I'm going to crisscross these 2 pieces of foil and press them down into the pan. So I'm doing 2 layers, you know, perpendicular. I'm getting it really into the very bottom, and especially like into that right angle between the bottom and the side. And then I like to bring it down and over the crust a little bit, over the top. But I'm just gonna fill it up for the most part. Maybe just as high as the crust goes. I do kind of like to really make sure they're settled in there. This is going into my 425 oven. And I want this to bake until the very top of the crust has started to set, dry out, even take on a little golden color. And then I'll remove them, and that'll be like, at this stage, 20 to 25 minutes.
Okay.
So I just turned off the heat. So that stem end, that's at the very top of the onion, that is what's keeping all of these layers of the onion together. I'm gonna actually slice that out because I wanna separate everything. So it's these sort of inner pieces that I'm really after because they're the prettiest. And then the onion is not really cooked. The onion is just charred on one side. So I'm gonna chop the rest of it. Anything that I don't set aside for decoration, I'm gonna chop the rest of it and just include that in the filling. I'll set these petals off to the side, and then I'm gonna start chopping. I don't care at all about the chop on this because it's all just gonna get cooked down and added to the filling. This recipe is for onion lovers because that's predominantly the flavor of the filling. I didn't include any cheese. Often you see cheese in quiche, but I feel like there's plenty of richness from the dairy and the filling, plus, you know, the pancetta, so I didn't think that it needed it. While I'm waiting on the crust, I'm just gonna go ahead and chop all the other alliums. So my shallot, I don't really need to see this part. It's not that interesting.
It is to me.
Is it? So then here's the leek. I'm only using the white and light green parts. Cal, you guys grow leeks? Mm-hmm. Yeah? I love leeks. I love like a braised leek dish. What's the secret?
They just take forever. Like, they're the first seedling you start. They're in the field
really?
the longest. The longer something's in the field, the more risk you have of...
Careful, Cal.
Something happening?
Can't leak that information.
So the secret is plant way more than you think you will. And start it really early. Now, you said that you never chop garlic.
Yeah, I can't. I don't have the patience for garlic. I just do not. Also, if you were to chop, you know, if I were to have one finely chopped thing, like the garlic being much smaller could burn. So I don't really want it to be too fine anyway. I want all this stuff to kind of cook at the same rate. So I have 2 tablespoons butter. I like to crisp the pancetta in a little butter because then it's like, I like the mixture of butter fat and pork fat. So I'm gonna add the pancetta. This is 4 ounces chopped.
Claire, what's the difference between a little pancetta and bacon for the folks at home?
So pancetta is not smoked. It is a cured, you know, pork belly product. I have to fact check everything I just said. I just don't know if that's right. Is that right? I don't know. It's been a minute since I've used pancetta in anything. I'm mostly vegetarian these days. Sort of. I want the pancetta to crisp and render some of its fat. That'll take, you know, 5 minutes or so. And in the meantime, I think that my crust is about ready. That's bubbling away. I'll keep an eye on it, but let me pull out the crust. I can smell it. Ooh, I got some butter dripping, which is c'est normal. Now I'm gonna transfer the pie weights to this bowl. Have something where you can, they're hot, so just remember that. The very top edge of the crust is golden brown. It looks dry and set. I'm gonna lift the pie weights out. So I like to gather the foil together into like a little bundle. Now the good thing about foil is it cools down like that. So I can touch the foil. Just don't touch the pan, the crust, or the bean. Okay, in there. Now it's gonna go back in at 325 just until it's really dry. I want some golden browning on the bottom. Cracks are normal. I'll show you how to deal with that. Okay, so back into the oven. I also I'll even let a little of the heat out of the oven because I don't want it to shock the crust. I don't want all the fat to come out. I don't want the pancetta to be hard and crunchy. I want a little bit of chew still, but I want like crispy edges. So I'm on medium heat to render some, not all the fat, and to crisp it up. If I, for whatever reason, wanted to like really render all the fat, I would go very low. I'm gonna actually remove the pancetta now, leaving the fat in the pan. The recipe says to use a slotted spoon. I have no idea how this happened, but I lost my slotted spoon. I don't know where it is. So I'm using a regular spoon, and I'm just kind of tipping, letting the fat like tip out of the spoon. Oh, I spilled the vinegar. Hold on. I'm just letting the fat kind of like drain out. And I only want the pancetta. I don't want to leave it in here because I don't want the pancetta to like dry out too much. I want to leave it with a little bit of softness to it, but I do want the fat. So I'm just setting that aside in a little bowl. And then I'm going to add all of my alliums. It's smoking a little bit, so I turned down the heat because it's pretty hot. So this obviously looks like a lot, but this will cook down quite a bit. I want everything to become tender, translucent, even somewhat caramelized and brown, and you know, it'll lose all of its volume and kind of collapse into this really delicious, jammy mixture. Allium mixture is cooked, so it's very soft, translucent, and some of the pieces are starting to brown around the edges, so this looks great. I haven't seasoned it yet. I'm gonna season it very lightly with some salt, and that's because the pancetta is salty. Plus, I'm gonna salt the egg and half mixture. So just a little bit. But I'm gonna add, let me kill the heat. I'm gonna add a lot of black pepper. And I'm gonna remove this from the heat. And when I say remove from the heat, often, I mean, usually what I mean is not just, you don't just kill the heat from underneath, you actually slide it to a cool burner or off the stove completely. So I'm gonna bring it over here, leave the pancetta there. And then lastly, to season it, I'm adding 2 teaspoons of white wine vinegar. You could do it, hit it with a little bit of lemon. And that's just because this dish is really rich. It has like all the oniony bits and the pancetta and the buttery pastry and the half and the eggs. And this just brightens it up a little bit, cuts through some of that. So put it right in the hot skillet, stir that together, set it off to the side. Now let's check on the crust. There's a couple of little extra measures that I take when it comes to the crust for quiche, or at least for this particular quiche, to ensure that I don't spring a leak. So I have 4 large eggs total. I'm gonna take one of them and beat it in a small bowl until there's no streaks. And for any pie, quiche, any tart, any kind of preparation where I have a crust and then a really liquid filling, I will give the crust, as I'm parbaking it, a little bit of egg wash. So I'll brush some egg across the surface, and that helps to just seal everything. Now, anticipating that I might have some cracks, I'm also gonna make a little bit of kind of like a very soft dough out of just flour and water and use it as a paste. And all you need is like the tiniest amount to patch any cracks, but it's an important step. So there's my egg. Let me grab my brush. Okay, here I have a little bit of flour. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of water. This is by feel. I didn't measure this. So this was a couple tablespoons of flour. I just put in a dash of water. You can always add more flour or water as needed. So here I just want to make a really soft dough that I can use to smear into any big cracks, because if you have cracks in your dough, that's the place where that filling can seep into. Yeah, this looks good. So miraculously, I don't really have much cracking, which is weird. You can see that the top of the dough, it has shrunk a little bit and pulled away and even started to curve inward. That's normal. It's kind of hard to prevent that from happening. So I don't even need that paste. It's kind of a waste. But I am gonna brush this egg wash So I'm particularly concentrating on the bottom as well as the area where the bottom meets the sides. That's the problem area. So save the rest of your egg. I probably only use like a tablespoon of egg. Save the rest because that's going to go in your filling. And then let's say I have a crack. You're going to take, just like the tiniest bit of this little dough. Okay, so what you do is you just smear this mixture into that crack. Like that. Does that make sense? So the crust goes back in until the egg is set, still at 325, about 5 minutes or so. So I have my half and half. This is room temp. That's important. For even, consistent cooking, you want your eggs and half at room temp. That's 2 cups. I think with quiche, what you want, or what I want in quiche, is like a really custardy, smooth, silky filling that's not too set. And you get that by having a lot of dairy in it. So it's 2 whole cups of half and half. I have the rest of that egg that I had used for egg wash. So go ahead and dump that in. The 3 remaining eggs.
It's not a lot of eggs.
It's not that many eggs. It's really fewer eggs than you would think. It's not a frittata. It's not like a frittata set in a crust. It really has much more dairy than any other kind of egg dish like that.
So it's more like a strata.
I've never made a strata, so who could say? So I'm gonna add 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Now I'm using Diamond. If you are using Morton, use 3/4 teaspoons instead of 1.5. Otherwise, you'll have a pretty salty quiche. You could whisk this and strain it, but I'm going to use my immersion blender. Again, you could do this in the jar of a regular blender. So I don't want to work a lot of air into it. I want to keep the blender submerged. I just want it to be smooth. These yolks are not wanting to break up.
Why not? We just whisk it.
You could just whisk it, but whisking generally isn't going to like blend the two together as effectively as a blender. It's just easier. Like in a restaurant setting, like eggs always go through a blender. And then you don't really have to strain because like a whisk won't break up some of those really stringy bits of the egg. And then you kind of want to strain it. So now I don't have to strain this even. You could use a whisk, that's fine. And now we have custard, petals, pancetta, alliums. I'm not going to mix this stuff into the custard. I'm just going to scatter it in the bottom. Oh, it smells so good. All those alliums really cooked down quite a bit. And now that pancetta can go in. Same thing, kind of scatter it around. Now the custard. Kind of pour it around slowly. And you want to pour into the very top. You might have to hold a little bit back because if your crust has like a little short area or if it's slumped a lot, but I might be able to get all of it in there. Okay, so I have like a tablespoon or 2 left. Could really almost go all the way in. And now I have, of course, my petals that I reserved, which are going to be so pretty. So when you put them in, don't just place them on top. Allow a little bit of the custard to get in the petal. That's how I think they look best. Just like that. You can also pour in, if you have a little bit of filling reserved, you can pour it in. So you want them kind of sticking out of the surface. You could add, okay, if you were like, how could you make quiche without cheese? I kind of understand what you're saying. I would, in that case, do a little parm. I think parm would be a good cheese. I mean, I guess you could do sort of a more melty cheese if you wanted to, but. So before this sits too long, I'm gonna get it into the oven. It's still at 325, and it's gonna cook all the way at 325. Be really careful with it. You don't want it to slosh around. And it will take, I would say, close to an hour, 50 to 60 minutes. And I will show you how to know when your filling is set. Okay. Oh, slide it in carefully. Okay. I feel like when you write it, it seems like a lot, but when you do it, It's not that big of a deal.
Dough, parbake, blend, bake,
Filling.
throw it in, filling,
Right.
mix together, bake it.
So I want to show you how I know it's done. There's a little bit of a jiggle on the surface. That will continue to set as it cools. So this is a good time to pull it out. It went about 55 minutes. But when I press around it, it's set. There's also a little bit of puffing that I see around the edge. So that's done. And I'm going to set it aside to cool. I wouldn't remove the ring when hot if you're even slightly concerned that the crust is stuck to the side somewhere. So just keep that in mind. Oh, she's beautiful. So the quiche is cooled. We did give it several hours because I want to get a nice clean slice. And it's just not, I think quiche is like best enjoyed as a room temperature food. To me, this is a perfect dinner with like a little green salad, lunch. You can eat it for any meal. It's good like that. Okay, so I'm gonna cut a slice. So once I get to the edge, I'm just gonna kind of saw through. It's a little soft, a little, tiny bit in the center. But other than that, it looks good. Can I just point out that I can do this? I can pick up the whole thing, and the bottom is golden brown. So that is like a not soggy. I'm very, very proud of that. That is sometimes a little bit of a technical feat to have golden pastry underneath your quiche. Actually, should I eat it like a pizza? I could. Cal, I know you think it's weird that it doesn't have cheese in it, but I don't think it needs it. It really has such good flavor. I feel like eggs and oniony things are really a match made in heaven. It almost has a cheesy quality because you have, everything is so savory and there's a nice richness from all that half and half and the pancetta. It's really good. Quiche is great because it's one of those things that like you can just leave it at a room temp. You can cut off a little piece. It's perfect for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I'm definitely going to have a slice tonight for dinner, maybe with a little green salad on the side. You could use anything to add to the filling that you want. I love this very savory allium-y version, but you could do, add a little cheese. You could take out the pancetta, whatever you want. Just follow all those steps for baking the crust beforehand, brushing it with that egg, patching any holes. That means that any quiche that you make will have a nice crispy crust on the very bottom, not soggy, which is so important. So thank you for watching. This is kind of a dessert person dinner, although really it's just a sleeper hit from Dessert Person, which has been fun to explore. Haven't made it in a while. So thank you for watching, and like and subscribe.